to the Two Into You podcast, the show where we explore the difference between love that lifts you up and love that holds you back. We're your hosts, Mary.
And I'm Madeline.
And each episode, we'll unpack red flags, celebrate green flags, and help you spot when someone is too into you. Run by Women's Age, the Two Into You campaign helps young people recognise when affection and romance crosses the line.
Together, we're here to give you the tools to navigate relationships with confidence. Today, myself and Mary will be breaking down myths and misconceptions about abuse and toxic relationships. We'll be answering the questions, does abuse go both ways? Why didn't they just leave? And is abuse just physical?
Before we kick off, remember, if you're worried about your own relationship or even a friend's relationship, you can call the Women's Aid 24-hour national Freephone helpline on 1-800-341-900 or use the chat service at 2intoyou.ie. Both are free and completely confidential. So let's get started. Madeline, today we're going to be myth busting around abuse, common misconceptions or ideas that people have about abuse. So in our own research, what we've realised is that there are a lot of misconceptions around abuse, and actually that is acting as a barrier for not only young people realising that they might be in an abusive relationship, but also that the abuse that's happening to them isn't their fault and that they deserve support.
Absolutely.
So today we're going to talk about some myths and hopefully create some clarity around these myths, because we know that abuse is complicated. It's frightening, especially when you're young, and we want people to know that nobody deserves abuse. Abuse is a choice, and it is unfortunately very common, but we want people to know it's not your fault and that there are supports out there. So the first myth that actually started the whole Two Into You project itself is the idea that abuse only happens to married people, people who are older and, older women. So over 13 years ago now, when Two Into You began, we started to see an increase in young women coming to use the services in Women's Age. So, coming to our one-to-one services, phoning the helpline, asking for support for toxic and abusive relationships. So we decided to set up a project specifically for young women, because what we learned from working with them was that they thought when we think of the word domestic violence or domestic abuse,
Right,
we think of it happening in like older relationships.
or that it has to be domestic, that it's in the home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But actually it can happen when you're young, and it can happen in your very first relationship. And I think that's what people didn't maybe realize. So that's why we created Two Into You, so that people could understand that and be able to recognize that what was happening to them does constitute abuse, but also know that that deserves support.
Absolutely.
So we have done 2 nationally representative studies in Ireland now, and what we found is that unfortunately abuse is really common amongst young people. So 1 in 5 young women and 1 in 11 young men in Ireland have been abused by a partner or an ex-partner. And that's aged 18 to 25. And actually for the young women who we surveyed, over half were subjected to abuse before they turned 18. So, they would be considered minors. And even though, you're young, it might be even your first relationship, it could be just as serious and just as scary.
It can happen in LGBT relationships. It can happen in any kind of relationship, really. Abuse is just as scary and just as serious, and no one deserves it at any age or at any point in their life.
Absolutely.
Another big myth that came up in the research and also just in conversation and when people were reaching out to the helpline is that there are specific reasons why someone might be abusive. And one of those reasons might be that they were using drugs or using alcohol, and that's what causes them to be abusive.
Yeah, so this is a really big myth, especially amongst young people.
Yeah.
That people think alcohol or drug abuse is like the root cause of abuse. But actually, when we define abuse and explain what it actually is, it's an imbalance of power and control. So intimate relationship abuse is when somebody tries to gain or maintain power and control over their partner, and they do that by exerting a pattern of controlling and manipulative behaviors. So if we look then at drugs and alcohol, while they might, be an aggravating factor, or they might make already existing abuse worse.
Yeah.
it's not a root cause. And abusive partners will also, exert power and control over their partner and not exert that same power and control over other people. So they'll wait to kind of specifically target their partner.
Right. So maybe they go out on a night out and they seem fine to everyone else, but then they're drunk and then they go home and threaten them or humiliate them or whatever.
Exactly.
It's still abuse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also, lots of people, get drunk or abuse drugs and alcohol without abusing their partners.
Yeah.
There is no excuse for abuse. Your partner should treat you well. And often it is, unfortunately, used as an excuse, in young relationships especially. Your partner might say, oh, he's just drunk. That's not the real me.
Yeah.
It won't happen again, things like that. But even if they're not directing it at you, and maybe they're kind of getting into fights on nights out, like if that makes you feel frightened, like that's really a red flag as well.
It is, absolutely. Like you shouldn't feel, you shouldn't feel you have to excuse their behavior if you feel scared or nervous or anxious or whatever it is. And also, you want to be able to have fun with your partner. You can go out and have drinks, but if they're turning around and causing you that discomfort and you feel frightened, that's not okay.
Yeah.
Like you said, intimate relationship abuse is about a pattern of control and really threatening behaviors. So it can be physical and can be sexual abuse. And those are really serious, but it can also be emotional abuse. It can be online abuse. It can be behaviors like threatening them or humiliating them. So all of these are very serious and all of them are taken seriously. But it's not just physical abuse. So if you're in a relationship and you feel like you're constantly being blamed or you feel like you can't break up with them, that's abuse as well. It's not just the physical things that happen.
Can you talk to me a little bit about online abuse? Because it's actually really common. So, of those 1 in 5 young women who were abused, 1 in 2 experienced online abuse. Online abuse is actually really serious. And I think people kind of brush it off as normal and don't see it as kind of as bad as the other forms of abuse, but actually it's really controlling. Can you give me a few examples of like maybe online abuse that you've heard of?
It's really controlling and it can be really scary because online abuse can feel inescapable. Like we're always online, we're always on social media, we're always on our phone. I am anyways. So if your partner is constantly texting you, like every hour, sending you millions of texts, that can be online abuse. If you don't want to be checked in on like that, that's not okay. If they are harassing you on social media, maybe they're leaving rude comments or they're trying to tell you what you can or can't post, that's not okay. That's online abuse. You should be able to be online freely and share what you want with the world.
Or taking down pictures, when they say, why are you posting that picture in that outfit?
That's not okay. You should feel free in your relationship and you should feel like they trust you. So if they're doing that, not okay.
Yeah.
And another one I think that's really common, 2 that are really common, is either they demand your passwords, be like, oh, well, if you trusted me or if you had nothing to hide, then you'll give me your password so I can see who you're texting. Or they'll say, okay, well, share your location with me so I know where you are at all times.
Or know that you're safe.
Yeah.
They'll use that as an excuse.
Exactly. Maybe you want to say, hey, X, I'm going out with the gals tonight. I'm going to be here. That should be enough. Just so they know where you are, whatever. Like if anything bad happened. If they do trust you, and they should trust you, which is a foundation of healthy relationships, they shouldn't need to be constantly keeping tabs on you, knowing who you're talking to at all times or where you are at all times. Just checking in with your partner is a lovely thing to do. But if you feel like you're being surveyed or like you can't escape them or can't, come up with enough excuses for what you were doing at night or wherever you were, that's not okay.
Yeah, it really is inescapable, especially because you have your phone all the time. And I think that's the thing that really shows us that you don't have to be living with a partner for it to be abusive. Because even if you're at home in your own room, you don't live together, maybe they live on the other side of the country, you know, they can still exert that power and control over you through your phone.
Yeah.
I heard a story about a young woman whose ex was really abusive and the abuse got much worse after she broke up with him. And, he was sending her a cent on Revolut so that he could put in an abusive message because she had blocked him on everything else. So it just goes to show that, someone will go above and beyond to kind of maintain that power and control over another person.
Another myth is that physical abuse is the most serious abuse. And while it is very serious, we know that, like we were just saying, 1 in 2 women who have experienced abuse have also experienced online abuse, and 9 in 10 have experienced emotional abuse. And emotional abuse is things like being gaslit, it's threats, it's humiliation, it's constant put downs.
Yeah, and things like, constant checking in, being intimidated, and, like checking in, like the phone thing, like having to be on your phone all the time, asking you, where are you, who are you with? Or like, even if you're out with your friends for, say, a coffee or something, and your phone is like blowing up, they're texting you all the time. And it mightn't even be, them saying, where are you? Like, why aren't you answering me? It could be like, oh, I miss you so much, can't wait to see you. Are you going to be much longer? I'm so excited for us to have the whole evening together.
Yeah.
It could be that way that's kind of almost guilt trippy.
Exactly. Yeah. Like you feel like, oh gosh, okay, when I get home, I'm going to have to make it up to them.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you have to almost apologize for having your own independence and your own life.
Yeah, not okay.
Not okay. And over the top jealousy as well, I think is one that happens a lot.
Yeah.
And that actually brings us to another myth, is that, being protective and being overly jealous just means that they really care about you.
It's so romanticized, especially like I love a rom-com. Every romantic comedy is like, oh my God, like if anyone else talks to her, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Like it's so romanticized, but it's also a red flag.
Yeah. And actually the whole like possession thing and jealousy thing, like we hear that so often from young women who have been in abusive relationships, where they'll say, my ex accused me of cheating on him, all the time, and then made me show them my phone or, tell them where I was all the time or who I was with as a way to control me, when actually I hadn't done anything. Jodie in our second episode talked about how her partner would accuse her of cheating all the time, even though it was her first relationship. She was 17. She'd never gone out with anyone before. So he just did it as a way to make her feel like she had done something wrong, turn the tables on her.
Shifting that blame from him doing something wrong to her.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think it's become a really normal behavior to say, oh, let me check your phone. Oh, let me look at this. Oh, me and my partner, we just share phones all the time. I think it's really normalized. And I think it's becoming more and more of a conversation about, actually, no, that's a red flag. They deserve their privacy. Everyone has the right to that privacy. And when you're in a relationship, you should be able to trust the person that you're with. So if they are demanding those things of you, that's not okay.
And also, it's kind of assumed that we know how to like have these conversations.
Yeah.
Because you might share your password with your partner and then decide, actually, hey, I've listened to the 2 and 2 podcast. I now know that actually I'm entitled to my privacy, and that is an important boundary for me.
Yeah.
So if you were to say that to your partner, they may say, oh my God, I didn't realize. That's no problem at all. Yeah, you can change your password or whatever. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's a sign of a healthy relationship.
Absolutely.
They're respecting your boundaries. They're listening to you. They're hearing you. But if they kind of get defensive and say, well, you should have nothing to hide, you should want to share your phone with me. Like, what's all this about? You're being really dramatic. Like, that's a really unhealthy sign. That's a very clear example of somebody not respecting your boundaries.
Yeah.
Or your needs, very simple wants in a relationship. Another myth then that's become really common, unfortunately, is the idea that women in particular make up sexual abuse.
Huge myth. We know that there was actually research that came out recently that said almost half of young men believe this myth, and almost a quarter of young women believe this myth. But we know that it's really difficult to come forward with something like that, and that when someone tells you sexual abuse has happened, you should believe them. But another kind of part of this conversation is that consent is something that needs to happen in a relationship or outside of a relationship. And we know that often within the context of intimate relationships is when sexual abuse happens.
Yeah.
So knowing how to set those boundaries and knowing how to have fun with consent and make having sex pleasurable and exciting for everyone is really important. The main thing about consent in a relationship is really just checking in with your partner, right? Like it's just, before you do something, after you're doing something, in the middle of doing something, it's always checking in with your partner. And it can be fun and it can be sexy and it can be cool or whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
But it's making sure that you're constantly checking in with your partner. And it's not just an absent part of your relationship.
There's more of a connection there. You know, you are asking each other, like, does that feel good? How does that feel? Do you like this? Do you like that?
Yeah.
Like, those are very normal things to say.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to be this very clunky, do you consent to this? Nobody's going to say that,
Yeah.
So really it's about learning how to make it a reality in your own relationship.
Yeah.
But the foundation of that is having a partner who respects you and cares about your needs and your wants and your comfort levels.
Yeah.
And also like the speed at which you want to move in the relationship.
Yeah. Just because you're in a relationship doesn't mean that you need to be having sex a certain amount of times or you need to, after they've taken you on some big, beautiful date, that you have to come home and you have to do something with them. It shouldn't be expected. And what should be expected is that you're checking in with each other, making sure you feel comfortable. And if you're both in the mood, there you go. Great. Have fun. But make sure you're checking in with your partner.
Yeah.
So we know that abuse can happen to anyone. But one of the really big misconceptions, and one that I think I've heard a lot, and one that I think is maybe kind of hurtful to the conversation that we have around abuse, is that abuse can go both ways. So how do you know the difference between someone who's a survivor and someone who is an abuser?
That's a great question. Again, to bring it back to, what abuse is. It's an imbalance of power and control. It's one person trying to gain and maintain power and control over another person. So there will be always one person who holds the power in the relationship. Generally, the person who's being abusive won't feel guilty or be conscious of, what it is that they're doing. They'll be acting a certain way to control and manipulate the other person. Whereas a survivor will feel guilty about how they acted. They'll wonder if they did something wrong. They might try and change their own behaviors. And actually by an abusive partner saying, or by one person saying, well, you were abusive back to me. You did this, you did that. They're actually using that as a way to manipulate you and to gaslight you by shifting the blame from themselves onto you, because that is what abusers will do all the time. They won't take any accountability for what they have done.
Yeah.
One of the things I would always say is to ask yourself why you acted the way that you did. So for example, if you're in a fight or your partner keeps you in a room, okay, they stand in front of the door, they block your way and they won't let you out.
Yeah.
So they may have not even touched you or anything, they just won't let you out of the room. So they're controlling your movements. So, that is
scary.
And it's also abusive.
Yeah.
If you then decide to, move them aside, that's a very normal thing to do.
Yeah.
But if they say, well, you pushed me, you're abusive right back. A good way to look at it is to ask yourself why you're thinking that way.
Yeah.
Why you maybe did something back, in inverted commas, to your partner. Was it to defend yourself or was it to gain, power and control and to manipulate your partner?
Right.
If you're thinking that it was to defend yourself, you are not the person who is being abusive.
Right.
But if it was to gain power and control or manipulate your partner, you are the person who's being abusive.
Yeah. I think the thing about this too is that they want you to feel like you deserve this abuse. They want you to feel like, oh, well, I'm acting this way towards you because you defended yourself in a fight against me. And you shouldn't feel at fault for trying to preserve your own safety.
Yeah. And another thing as well, as we learn more and more about intimate relationship abuse, red flags, green flags, gaslighting, love bombing, negging, all this kind of language around abuse, that then becomes something that an abusive person will try and use against you. Yeah. So they will co-opt that language to turn it back on you. So again, they're trying to shift the blame to make you feel like you've done something wrong and that if you just changed your behavior, that maybe things would change. Because as we know, abusers will always try and shift that blame. They won't take accountability for what they've done. And they'll make you try and change the things that you do, what you say, where you go, how you act, you know, who you hang out with, in order to keep you in the little bubble that they want to have you in.
They want you to feel guilty.
Exactly.
A phrase that might come up in that kind of situation as well is, oh, if it's this bad, or if you're this afraid of me, or if I make you feel this horrible, why don't you just leave? Or someone kind of looking onto the situation would be like, okay, well, you know, she feels so horrible with her partner. Why doesn't she just leave him?
Yeah.
So why doesn't she just leave?
Yeah. You know, people stay in abusive relationships for lots of different reasons. It can be very difficult for someone to leave an abusive relationship. You know, there could be safety implications. Maybe they're isolated from family and friends. That's something that happens all the time when you're cut off from the people around you. So you feel like the relationship is the only thing that you have. And if you break up with your partner, that you'll have nothing, or that you'll never find love again. Also, it can be very frightening to try to leave an abusive relationship. Generally, after a breakup, the abuse might get even worse, because the abusive partner will amp up those controlling behaviors to try and save the relationship, to try and save all that, you know, hard work that they did to get someone into that position of being controlled and manipulated. So it can be a really, really frightening thing to do. But also, you know, a relationship that ends in abuse started with love.
Yeah.
People don't get into relationships with somebody who was abusive. And I think that's one of the hardest things about abuse, is that this is happening by the person that is supposed to love and care about you the most in the whole world.
Yeah.
So it can be really confusing and really frightening to think about breaking up. And I suppose the idea of, you know, it being bad enough only adds to the shame and stigma of abuse, because no one wants to feel like this is something that happens to them.
Yeah.
There's kind of this idea of, you know, the perfect victim, that it's this broken kind of woman. But actually, you know, abuse can happen to strong people. It can happen to brave people.
Yeah.
It can happen to outgoing and outspoken people. So when it happens to you, it can feel really shameful. And because of what your partner is telling you, it can feel like, well, how did I let this happen to myself?
Exactly. And I think there's a lot of conversation like online. Like I always see TikTok or Instagram and it's like, oh my gosh, like I would never let a man treat me like this. Or, oh my gosh, I would never let them treat me like this. Like girls run if they do this. Yeah. But you've gotten so far into the relationship. It started out so beautifully. You know, they got along with your friends and they sent you lovely gifts and they did all these things and you think they love you. But then you're stuck because, you know, they've got this power and control over you. So it's not that you're letting abuse happen to you. It's that you're being abused.
Exactly. Abuse is done to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really, we just need to remember that people in abusive relationships need support and understanding and not judgment, because it's hard enough being in an abusive relationship. So we need to, you know, believe people when they tell us that it is hard and that it is frightening and difficult. It's not that easy, basically, to leave.
But that also there is support for you, whether that's something like 2 and 2 or Women's Aid, or if it's just your group of friends that you still have, support is available.
Yeah. And especially the friends piece is so important. You know, we have to look out for our friends. When you're in an abusive relationship, you can be cut off from your friends, or your partner might have made it really hard for you to see them. Maybe they've told you that you're not allowed to talk to them. So maintaining that contact is really important, and that's something we spoke about with Jodie in our last episode, you know, the importance of her friends sticking behind her. And again, just to direct people to the Help a Friend guide on our website, which is really helpful if you're worried about someone in your life and you just don't know how to kind of approach it, because it can be intimidating, but it can be really, you know, a huge lifeline if someone is kind of trapped, you know. And, you know, it's not just about leaving. Isolation is one piece, but maybe, you know, you're experiencing financial abuse. Maybe they financially control your money, so you mightn't have access to your bank account. Maybe they've limited your hours in work or told you to reduce your hours. Maybe they've made you drop out of school or college, so limiting your access to work and further education. You know, if you're reliant on them in terms of language, you know, if English isn't your first language and they act as a translator for you, Or maybe if your migration status is linked to them, that's a really common one, especially for people seeking asylum or refuge here. It can be really, really difficult and really frightening to have to do that because, you know, one of the things that we hear very often is an abusive partner will say, well, if you do this, I'll get you deported. I'm going to report you to the guards. And that really builds on that kind of fear amongst minorities of authorities because of the racism and discrimination that they experience.
Yeah. And another thing is, even if you're in a young relationship, you may have children with that person and you want to be there for your children. So if they're threatening, oh, well, I'm going to make sure you never see them again, and all you want to do is be a good parent, then that can be really scary and you may not want to leave. And I think something that you said in the previous episode is that the person who's being abused knows when it's safe for them to leave and knows when it's right for them to leave. So I think that that's something else to consider when maybe you're looking at a relationship and thinking, oh my God, he's so horrible or they're so horrible. Why don't they just go?
And actually, just to remember that, like, instead of looking at all the things that she's, in quotes, putting up with, look at all the things she's doing to stay safe and to, you know, protect herself within that. Because actually the things that we see maybe as her just dealing with are the things actually she's doing to survive. Because we have to recognize that abuse, it completely takes a toll on your mental health, your physical health. It breaks down your self-esteem, your sense of self. Like, the emotional impacts of abuse are so devastating. You know, they include post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, attempted suicide. These are very serious things. So abuse, it's not something that just kind of happens and you get over it. It's something that can have a really, really tough impact on your life and your mental health. So then, like, adding judgment and stigma on top of that is not going to help someone. So let's not be that person.
Let's not be that person. No. One thing that a survivor might hear is that no one's going to believe you. Why would they believe you? I look so great, or I've done this, or your parents love me, or, oh my gosh, your best friends, they think I'm the coolest. No one's going to believe you.
That it's all in your head and you made that up, and how would you relax, calm down?
Well, Women's Aid will believe you. You know, we have a chat service on 2and2.ie, and we have the National Freephone Helpline. And if you call, whether or not you feel like you're in crisis, or if you just feel like you're worried about your relationship, someone will be there. A trained helpline volunteer will be there to listen to you, to believe you, and to support you.
And it's really just like a space for listening, for you to be heard. So even if it's like the start of a relationship and something feels a little bit off and you just kind of want to talk through things, or maybe it's, you know, the end of a relationship and you're thinking, okay, what are my next steps? Like, we can help you through that, because again, it can be scary. Or maybe if you're worried about a friend and you don't know who you can talk to about it, like, that service is there for you as well. They're completely free and confidential. And we don't also ask any identifying questions. We don't ask you your name, your age, where you're from, anything like that. It's really just a space to ask questions and be heard and believed. Finally, then, our last myth is the idea that after an abusive relationship, that you're told you'll never find love again.
Yeah, that's a lie.
Yeah.
Healthy love does exist. And I think, so in our previous episode, Jody actually spoke really beautifully about this, about how, you know, even though she still feels the impact of abuse and she's a survivor of abuse, she's found this really beautiful relationship that's patient, that's trusting, that's respectful, and she feels really safe. And I think it's important that everyone knows that whether or not you've been in a relationship, whether or not you're a survivor of abuse, that healthy relationships do exist, healthy love does exist, and that you deserve that. Remember, if you're worried about your own relationship or even a friend's relationship, you can call the Women's Aid 24-hour National Freephone Helpline on 1-800-341-900 or use the chat service at 2and2.ie. Both are free and completely confidential.
Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you follow the 2and2 podcast wherever you get your podcasts. A new episode drops the first Monday of every month. See you next time.